This is not something I like doing, being up here, honestly. And when I agreed to it, I agreed because Harold asked me. We had a conversation, and you've heard me say, you should come up here and do service, worship leading, or you should come do a sermon. And if I say it, then I best well put my foot in my mouth and do it myself. And so the topic is generally outside of what we think of. Normally, Harold's been going on in Matthew and talking about Matthew and pulling stories from there. And what I'm actually talking about is going to be about patience and perseverance, which is something you can find in the stories in Matthew. But I figured one of the books that I had been going through was going through the life of Elijah, and this passage caught me and it stuck with me, and I couldn't help getting around the fact that I see both of these things in here very evidently. So the story starts off with Elijah the Tishbite from Tishba, which would be the settlement on the outside, on the other side of the Jordan. He's walking to go talk to the king of Israel, which in and of itself would be like a person from Burkton going to the president of the United States and saying, there's going to be a drought for years. And the amount of courage he has is to say something else. But after that, he goes away. He hides. God tells him to hide by a little brook near the Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan. And that's where I want to pick up. So he camps out in this brook during a time of drought where the water may run out at any point in time. And so Elijah has to rely on God and be patient with God. And I don't know about you, but going for a day without water alone is a hard thing. And it would test my patience. I could only probably do about 2 days in the wilderness. If I was going out camping and I only had a day's worth of water, I could only probably do about 2 days before I just lost all desire to be out there. I'd give up and I'd go home. And in a way, God is testing Elijah to try to challenge him to be reliant on God, waiting on God to sustain him. And eventually, the brook dries up. So put yourself in Elijah's shoes. You're sitting at a brook. You have a little bit of water. You're cupping your hands, and you're relying twice a day for birds to feed you. And slowly you see that water diminishing, little by little. Do you give up? Mind you, if he leaves, he goes back to Israel, Ahab's looking for him because he's not happy with what he said earlier, so he has no real choice. He's waiting. And eventually the water dries up. It's gone. And now, I don't know about you, but I would not have the patience to deal with that. But God tells him to go to Zarephath. Now, Zarephath in Sidon would be located in where Palestine is, where the Philistines were. He would have to walk from the east side of the Jordan River, all the way across a dry and barren land in the middle of a drought to get to a location that is the enemy of the Israelites. He has no food to prepare him, and he has no water to sustain him. At this point, I would be questioning, God, what on earth are you doing? Why? And he starts walking. What comes to mind at this point is and you can tell I'm getting nervous. Some of you can, I do well up here. Apologize. Sorry, mind elsewhere. There was a conversation I had with my dad years ago. And the question is, what is the difference between stubbornness and persevering? And we had a conversation about it, and I honestly forgot about it until a month and a half ago in Sunday school was brought up by Eric about the difference between stubbornness and persevering. And the best we can come up with is where your heart is aligned. Is it aligned toward God or away from God? And I don't know about you, but I'm about 3/4 stubborn, 1/4 rebellious, also known as German Swiss. I'm sure there's a few of you in here as well like that. And it's not the first time that this comes up. If we look through the history of the Bible, there are multiple people there who exhibit either stubbornness or perseverance. Pharaoh was very stubborn. Sarah, Abraham's wife, was stubborn. The woman who was bleeding and touched Jesus' cloak was persevering. David was persevering. Pharaoh was stubborn and hard-headed, and even though he had multiple chances, God hardened his heart. And it says that multiple times, to the point that he eventually met his end. Sarah was stubborn as well, but a different way. She believed, but she ended up giving up hope. She lost hope. And at that point, it became stubbornness, because she went away from what God intended. And then you have the story of Hagar and Ishmael. The woman with bleeding had the same determination to go through a crowd of people who would have judged her and who would have known her and known what was medically wrong with her, and eventually touch the hem of Jesus' cloak. She was healed. And David waited in a cave for years, being persevering through all the trials. He could have launched a rebellion. He could have taken over Israel, but that's not what he thought God wanted. I personally see myself more along the lines right now in life as Sarah, as in losing hope in some aspects of my life. A lot of hope other places, but in some. And this is where stubbornness and perseverance comes in. Elijah had perseverance. He walked miles and miles without food or water through the desert. He was almost like the exact opposite of Pharaoh. Bullheaded, stubborn, determined. In the end, he saw his just reward. He got to go to heaven. My question is, who are we? Where do I see myself? I said as Sarah. Do you see yourself as Pharaoh? Probably not. You're here. Maybe. Do you see yourself as a woman bleeding who is going through hardship that everybody knows about, but you don't care, and you're just going to doggedly go towards what you know is right? What about David? You feel like you have the world against you. What about the friends of the man on the stretcher who took his friends to see Jesus? They believed so strongly that they carried their friend, drug him up a roof, tore the roof apart, and lowered him down. Where are you? So Elijah's making this journey. He goes through the wasteland. He's covered in dust. It's been days. He's sweating. He's exhausted. The Lord has been sustaining him. He finally gets to Zarephath, and he goes up to the well. He has nothing to draw water with. He's dying of thirst. And he looks at the widow. He asks, "Can you get me some water, please? Can you also get me some food? I'm starving." And the widow is against it at first, and then she obliges. And I think this was the moment where I realized that Elijah was not in the desert to torture him. He was in the desert to wait on God because, well, God asked us to wait on him, but more importantly, God was waiting on the widow. More often than not, I find that I struggle with waiting on others. I see it at work, I see it with my friends, I see it with my family. And when I wait on God, doors open. When I don't and I get stubborn, I want to do things my own way, things close up rather quickly. But I have to remind myself at the end of the day, I am waiting on God because more often than not, that God is waiting on me and waiting on others and waiting on them to change. See, we all, in this journey of perseverance and stubbornness, we have to have our heart shift, and God can do that in miraculous and amazing ways, but it takes time. And not everybody's time is the same. Where I'm at is not always where you're at, or any of you are. And you might be in a place that I'm not at. And I need the grace to allow myself to go and get to where God needs me to be and where you need me to be. And the same is in reverse. I think this is one of the hardest things for people my age, my generation, and younger than me, because we have grown up in a world of instant gratification. It used to be, back in the day, if you wanted to order something online, you either had to go to the store, or you had to get a catalog, and you had to place an order, and you had to wait weeks and months for it to come in anticipation. Now, Amazon, next day delivery. And it used to be that, I'm not going to go all the way back in time, but when TV shows used to be aired weekly, and you'd have to wait for the TV show to come out weekly, and if you missed the TV show, it would be aired next week at an earlier time. And you had to wait for that, and if your buddy had watched Survivor the previous week and you missed it, and I know a Survivor reference going back in time a little bit, you would tell him not to tell you anything related to the episode till you caught it again on that Thursday night, and then you'd be caught up. And it was just a frustrating game if they're like, well, this is what happened. But now, if you want to watch TV, you can watch the entire show and stream it on Netflix in a day or a week, however long it takes you to get through that show. It used to be if you wanted to call somebody or get in contact with somebody, you'd have to call the phone and hope they picked up at home, and there was no answering machine. And if they were there, they were there. If they weren't, there's no message machine, so it was just it was. Now, call, don't pick up, text, 30 minutes later, hour, get a response. And that's the problem that I think a lot of what I struggle with is, because I see the mountain, I see the top of it, I see the goal, I see where I want to get to, I know my dream. I forget there's a mountain there, and I gotta hike it, I gotta climb it. That's the hard part. And some people are at different stages in that journey of climbing that mountain. And see, some people are at different points, and some are working at more than others, and some are slowing it down. And God knows all that. He keeps track of all that. And to him, time is much more flexible than I think we understand. And because of that, what could take 3 seconds for us is 3 years for him, just picking the little pieces and making sure everything's perfect the way it is. And there are times where 3 years seems like 3 seconds. And so Elijah, waiting by the stream, waiting on God, waiting for God to tell him, was allowing a chance for God to work in the widow's life. I imagine at the beginning of the drought and the beginning of the famine, she probably had enough stashaway where she thought, there's enough for me and my son. We can make it. We got this many days. If we ration it out, we can make it happen. But at some point, the flour grew low. The oil grew low. At some point, the hope started going away. And she goes to the well one last time to get the water, to make the bread, to make the last meal for her and her son. And you can hear the weariness, the giving up in her voice. As surely as the Lord God lives, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in the jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. And as she's at the well, a man, dusty and dirty, sweaty, defeated, walks up, straggling up and asks, "Can I have some water? Can I have a little bit of food?" If this had probably been a few months earlier when she had enough that she could ration out and plan, she'd probably go, "No, I can't. I have only enough for my son and I." But now she's given up hope, and she's at the point of saying, "It is what it is. We will make the best of it." It took that time. And in a way, that's the entire story of Elijah and Elisha. Waiting on Israel, waiting on Ahab, waiting on Israel to come around. And in a way, that's our story. God's waiting on us. And we're waiting on others. And we have to persevere. So, as we live our lives, as we go on, it may be hard and struggle. Remember at the end of the day that I have to be patient because God is moving in a way in somebody else's life that I may not understand. And I will struggle with it, and it will be hard. And I will have to go back and realign my heart to God so that my stubbornness doesn't get the best of me and I don't give up. Because that's easy to do, honestly. I'm very much like that in some regards. And I encourage you as you go throughout this week and throughout the upcoming months, remember, oftentimes when we're waiting on God, it's because God is waiting on us.